one day, my husband told me I want to keep the Sabbath.
Y un día, pues mi esposo me dijo, quiero mantener los sábados.
And I went crazy.
Y me volví loca.
And long story short, the Lord spoke to my heart. And after 19 years of praying,
Y para hacer la historia corta, Dios me habló al corazón y después de 19 años de oración.
and the last 4 very difficult,
Y los últimos 4 han sido muy, muy difíciles.
because they were not the problem. We were in the wrong place. We were not home.
Las denominaciones no habían sido el problema, éramos nosotros que no estábamos en casa.
So the Lord brought us here to Dothan Messianic. We find you guys through Facebook.
Entonces el Señor nos trajo acá a la congregación de Dothan Messiánica y los encontramos a través de Facebook.
And I remember one time when we started to keep the Sabbath, and I forgot to say this at the beginning, I'm sorry. And I was sharing with the elder Gabriel and with him last night that when we start to keep the Sabbath, we're sitting on in our dining room table, the 3 of us.
No mencioné al principio, pero una vez estábamos manteniendo el sábado santo y compartí esto con Gabriel anoche. Nos sentamos en la mesa de comedor.
And my husband was teaching us the Bible, and he put his prayer shawl and opened the Bible, and he started teaching us. And the Ruach Kodesh moved so powerful. And the glory of Yeshua was there with us. Praise to his holy name. So,
Y mientras estábamos aprendiendo sobre la Biblia, mi esposo se cubrió con el manto de oración y empezamos a leer la palabra y a alabar a Jesús, y el Espíritu Santo entró en nuestro hogar y se glorificó.
So we are here after 19 years of wandering and praying.
Estamos aquí después de 19 años de explorar y vagabundear y oraciones.
So if your prayer have not been answered, it's on the way.
Si su oración no ha sido respuesta, está de camino.
So thanks to Yeshua for bringing us in here. It's been a long, difficult road. But praise to Yeshua. Bless his holy name. We are here. We are no longer alone.
Amen.
Alabado sea Jesús. Por 19 años estuvimos orando y finalmente estamos en casa. Alabado sea su nombre.
Thank you.
Amen.
Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you guys for sharing.
Thank you.
And welcome home.
That's right. Amen.
Yeah, the Father leads us many times through a period of wilderness and wandering, just like he led his people, Israel, in those ancient times through a period of wilderness and wandering. And he gets us to the point where we crave fellowship and community. Because if he leads us straight out of man's systems and man's traditions and straight into the promised land, we don't crave those things. And the first conflict that we have with people, and the first time we butt heads with people, we say, okay, bye. We don't really crave it. And in this setting, we crave it. We come together, and the Father draws us here, and we're finally home, and we have that, okay, we're family. We all know so much about each other already, just from the first meeting, and we have to work through conflict. One of the things that really sets us apart as a Messianic Fellowship is that, how many of you saw any other Messianic Fellowships on your way into to service this morning? Anybody? I didn't see any either. But how many of you saw like a Baptist or a Methodist church on your way in, right? How many of you saw more than one? Yeah, there's, almost literally one on every corner. And so what happens is if you have a disagreement with one here, or you don't like how the music is over here, then you just, consumerism says you just keep shopping and you find the right one that fits with your needs. But the Bible says that you stay plugged into your community and you go through the proper protocols with love. Matthew chapter 18, you resolve conflict, and your family, you're stuck together. As my dad would say, you're one big, happy, dysfunctional family. And that's what we are, right? But we're not very dysfunctional. Just a little bit.
We keep the fun and dysfunctional.
We keep the fun and dysfunctional. That's very true. We do. Well, I was expecting a much smaller amount of people here this morning, and I thought everyone would be sleeping in and have Passover. Yeah, but I am very honored that you all came this morning and you got out of beds. And wasn't it a wonderful night last night, celebrating our redemption from slavery and dominion of sin over our lives? I want to do something real quick before we kind of take care of some housekeeping things real quick. The first one is I want to acknowledge those who participated in the Hebrew class, but you weren't here last week. And how about anybody participating in Hebrew class? Can you just stand up and completed all 8 weeks of the Hebrew class? Can you go ahead and stand up? There's nobody here who did. Go ahead, everybody who participated, stand up in the 8 weeks. Anthony, yeah. Who else? Yeah, the Whitakers are not here. Now, you all got your certificates last week, right? Karen, did I give you a certificate last week? Okay, can you come on up and I'm going to embarrass you and give you one? Da, 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 da. You don't want. I imagine you want one with your name on it, right? There's so many here. I saw last night and I didn't give them a certificate.
I was in and out. I may not have one.
I may not have one for you.
That's fine.
I'll get you one later. Sorry.
That's right.
We forgot to tell you that. Yeah.
I was actually a repeater.
Here, well, you at least get the gift that everyone else got. I'm giving her a Hebrew calendar with all the Hebrew dates and the parsha on it and everything. So it has all the Hebrew holidays and everything else. But we need to get you a certificate as well. The other group of people I want to acknowledge this morning are people who Sunday drove up to Blue Spring State Park and underwent immersion in water for the very first time in the Messianic faith, or just as a new believer in Yeshua. Could you stand if you're here today and you were immersed Sunday? I think there was 10 of you. That's awesome. Yeah. So, welcome to the family, and yeah, you guys can be seated, but I just wanted to acknowledge you all and just say that you are part of the family now. You are part of the faith, and some of you, this was the very first time you underwent immersion in your life, like full immersion. Some of you went through immersion and you did the baptism years and years ago, early in your walk, but you wanted to renew that time. And so some of you underwent immersion again on Sunday. So that was just a great honor to be a part of that and facilitate that. The other thing we want to take care of this morning, we got a couple of dates coming up. Now that Passover is over, it's kind of like everyone takes a sigh of relief, right? And all the dates, the calendar kind of frees up a little bit. And the next High Holy Day is not until June 8th, I believe it is, which is on a Sunday, and it's Shavuot, or Pentecost. And I need to remember to talk slow, because Jose's back there trying to translate, so help me remember to talk slowly. I'm sorry. Muy rápido. Anyways, so the next date between now and Shavuot is May 3rd, which is our yard sale. And you see there's like lots of stuff accumulating up there for our yard sale. So what we're going to do is 7 o'clock in the morning, if you're willing to come and help set up the yard sale out here in the parking lot, the yard sale will officially begin at 8 o'clock, and we're going to try to sell as much of the stuff as we can. For that stuff that we don't sell, it's on you. You need to, if you didn't want it to be donated to like a thrift store or something like that, come back and get it and reclaim it. Otherwise, we're going to just donate everything that does not sell to like a thrift store, unless I like it, then I'll hang on to it. But the other thing, Rosh Chodesh game night is the following day on Saturday. We're going to have a game night at our house again. We're starting a tradition every Rosh Chodesh, which is the new month, of having just a family game night. We blow the shofar, we say some blessings of the new month, and then we just have fun. We play board games, and the competitive side of everybody kind of comes out. It's interesting. I think that's going to be 6:30 or 7, but yeah, I'm not. Check our website, I'm not certain.
And on that yard sale, are we going to get together? Are we going to get together and make posters for the yard sale, or
yes,
some kind of advertising?
I think we have a yard sale planning committee, okay, which consists of Stacy, my wife, and I'm looking at Joanne because I feel like you volunteer for the maybe. Okay.
You were volunteering.
But we need more yard sale planning committee members. So if you're willing to be a part of the planning committee for the yard sale, then see Joanne or Stacy. All right. I wanted the theme of today's teaching. Yeah, I missed something.
We have one family that wasn't here last night to hear the Uganda.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yes.
I wanted to repeat our big announcement about Uganda is that we've hit the $15,000 goal. Yeah. And we can officially build the entirety of Shema Junior School, which will be a 400-seat Messianic primary school in the heart of the Muslim country in Uganda.
Yes.
So,
Hallelujah.
and again, it is 85% Muslim in that city, and I've been there. I witnessed it in the middle of Ramadan. It is a very Muslim city. Yeah.
I'd also like to announce that when Gabe came back, he announced a need for a guest house, and Mishkanim, when he stopped off in Florida, Mishkanim, the musical group, donated $1,000 to start that fund. Since then, we've had another $1,500 come in for that, so we're halfway there to being able to purchase this guest house. We're at $2,500 on that project. So that's coming along.
Say it again, I did not hear the translation.
I'll repeat it. When I go to Uganda, it costs me. Would you mind looking through that for my laser pointer? I'm looking for my laser pointer. It costs me about $400 just to stay in a hotel that's secure enough for a Westerner to stay in. Theft is a really big problem there, and when a Westerner comes to that part of Uganda, you stick out like a sore thumb. It's a city of like 40 to 50,000. It's a city of like 40 to 50,000, and you're the only Westerner there. The whole time I don't see any other Westerners, anybody from outside of Uganda. So security is an issue. I have to stay at a hotel when I'm there. And any other visitors who come to Uganda have to stay in a hotel as well because it's got a wall around it and it's got armed guards at all times. So it's costly to stay there. And then I leave, I travel, and I go straight to the synagogue there and travel back. But I stay at night in that hotel. But when I was there in Uganda last, I was sitting out in the front yard of the synagogue talking to some people. And I looked at this. Oh yeah, I looked at this house across the street. And where was I at?
Really wrapped it up.
Across the street. And I asked them, how much would a house like that cost? Because all these trips over and other Americans who are coming over spend a lot of money just for hotels. And that money just goes to the hotel keeper, the hotel owner. And I thought, how cool would it be if the congregation owned that home and then guests to come stay in that home, but also that serves the dual purpose of, how many of you remember Irene? She's the widow mother of 8, and her 2 kids are going into nursing school right now. They're in nursing school. What they've done, they've taken all her kids and dispersed them to other families within the congregation. So it would be like my kid's going to stay, one of my kids going to stay with the Alfreys, another kid going to stay with the Lilies, and then my 3rd kid going to stay, so they're like split up, and they come together every Shabbat and worship together, but that's the only way she can really, but Irene is there, and she cares for a couple of her own kids. She lives off of $2 to $3 a day, but I thought, how cool would that be to take her whole family and put them in that house? And she be kind of like the hostess of the house, so when a visitor comes, she cooks and cleans and stuff like that. She just is a hostess for them, and she just lives there for free. And she can rent out her little shack that she lives in currently. She lives in a little 1-bedroom shack right now. And she is just an amazing woman, guys. I wish you could meet. I wish I could bring her here. Just so full of joy. Just an incredible woman. Never goes without a smile on her face. And her husband died of a combination of malaria and another disease 2 years ago. But I thought that'd be so cool. The house that I was asking for is the house of a witch doctor.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that. And they said, oh yeah, that's a witch doctor who lives there. I was like, oh, really? And they said, yeah, but she's mad at us because her powers are diminishing. And I was like, oh, interesting. And she's looking to move into town. She's looking to move into the middle of the city where her powers will begin to come back because she's too close to where we pray against those things, And you guys, if anybody in this room denies powers and principalities, the unseen world, I'll take you to Uganda and I'll show you some things. And you go to Haiti, you can see some stuff that's happening. There's things that happen in the unseen world and unseen realm that are beyond our comprehension. And anyways, so her powers are diminishing. She's mad at our sister congregation for being there and growing, and she's looking to move, and I want to buy her house, in a nutshell. And I want to put Irene in her house, and then I want to stay in her house when I go and travel, and then let other visitors come and stay in her house as well. So I don't know how much it will cost exactly, but when we find out, we'll make some efforts to maybe fundraise and buy that home and send them money to buy that home. It will belong to the congregation of Beth Yeshua, Messianic congregation, but it will be open for visitors to come and stay, and Irene and her kids will live in that home. But, yeah.
Is the security, would it be the same situation that have
Yeah.
arms or whatever?
Yeah, and when I go, I would have to hire a private security guard or two to at least at night. The security guards they don't have, guns are not legal in Uganda except if you're police, army, or private security. And so I priced it out, I could probably hire private security to be there with me all night for probably like $8 to $10. And that would be making good money for them. So that's a third of what I pay for a hotel room, essentially. So anyways, so that's on the horizon as well. And at the end of our teaching today, I'm going to talk about something else that we as a community are going to be fundraising for and looking forward to coming up to Shavuot as well. Okay, but yeah.
Yesterday or the day before, Jim and I were watching some Christian programming, and one of the speakers was talking about how we as believers need to be taking the offensive and kicking Satan and his works to the curb.
Yeah.
And what you are doing and what we as a congregation are doing is exactly that.
Yeah.
Because of putting this school in primarily Islamic territory, number one, and then taking witch doctors in the house, number two, that is kicking him to the curb and his works.
Yeah.
We are to be on the offensive and taking back ground.
Yeah. Yeah, you've heard it said, the gates of hell will not withstand you.
Prevail against
you. It doesn't mean the gates are going to leave and attack us. That means we're supposed to be attacking the gates of hell, right?
Exactly.
We're supposed to be on the offense, just like you said. And those gates of hell will not prevail against us.
God's
in attacks.
works are much greater
Yeah.
than what the enemy, because all he can do is counterfeit. Yes, you see some crazy things, but God can also do amazing and wonderful things. So
Amen.
put us all here.
I really need my laser pointer for this teaching because I wanted to use this.
I did look.
Maybe Annie or Adrian, would you mind popping in and asking Noah where he put that, because he was the last to use it. Once I find that, we'll move on. But the theme of today's teaching is, well, this week's Torah portion is Pesach, which is all about the story of Passover, right?
Right.
And we see in Exodus chapter 14, Israel is on the run. So the question is, Passover happened, but now what? So we just celebrated Passover last night, but now what? Does that mean the story's over? Does that mean we're completely saved and redeemed and we're like good to go? We can find rest? No. The story has just begun for the people of Israel, right? Now they're on the run. Now they're outlaws. But the interesting thing happened with, oh, thank you so much. Did he have it in his pocket? All right, I'll tease him later. Okay. He's probably back there burning kids' retinas with it. Thank you, Adrian. Now Israel is on the run. And so they leave Egypt in a moment's notice, right? It's at the break of dawn, they're booking it out of Egypt. They're free after centuries of slavery and poverty and forced labor. And what happens? They come to a sea, right? And there they're like Moses. This happened on most scholars agree the third day they come to a sea. 3 days of traveling. They get there, there's millions of them probably, and they say, Moses, why did you lead us out here to die at the hand of the Egyptians? Because they have a sea to their front and an army, the most well-trained and advanced, technologically advanced army known to the world at that time is chasing them. And they're a bunch of former slaves who have no idea how to fight and engage an enemy in an army like that. And they say, we're hopeless, we're full of despair. Why did you lead us out here to die? But an interesting thing happens. Everyone knows the story, right? Tradition says that there was a man who stepped into the water, and he took another step, he took another step, and he was up to his neck, and then the sea split open, right? And then all the Israelites went in. It said that the tradition says that each side of the sea became like brick or pave work as they walked through. It was so secure for them. And even in the Torah scroll, when we get out the Torah scroll and read that portion of the Torah, the text, the Hebrew text, is actually laid out like a series of bricks. Just to kind of create a picture of that. And then you know what happens? They get through, the last person gets through, and then the walls cave in on them, right? Those brick walls fall down and kill all the Egyptian army. So it's really interesting to me, why did God not just lead them out, close up the sea, but why did he have to kill the army as well? Why did he have to decimate all of those guys, all of those horses, all those chariots? Why did he have to leave them at the bottom of the ocean? And here's my theory. God not only decimated Pharaoh's economy and their religious system. You see, he decimated their crops. He wiped out their cattle. He made a mockery of all their gods, using them as plagues against the people who worshiped them. He decimated all that. But he also destroyed its military, thus eliminating its ability, Egypt's ability to invade, conquer, and plunder the wealth of other nations. So he crippled them. I mean, he put them in a third world status. He thrust them from the premier superpower of the world suddenly into a third world nation with no gods, no army, an embarrassed leader, incapable of plundering other nations, and the mass exodus of a large source of free labor. They were crushed, right? The dominion of Egypt, the sovereignty of Egypt, was crushed. And that is exactly what Yeshua did to the kingdom of Satan. Not only did he liberate you from the dominion of sin and death and the power of hell and the forces of hell over us, but he crushed its inability. He crushed its ability to re-express and to plunder and to regain its power. He put Satan in a third world status. And that's what he did for us on the cross. So Passover happened, now what? Let's go. What I'm going to do today is something a little bit different than we normally do. If we go to Matthew chapter 26, let's turn there. And I hope it doesn't get too dark if I turn more lights out. Is that okay? If I do that so you can see a little better up here? One of the things that we do in the Messianic world is we get really into reading the Torah portions and really into reading parts of the Tanakh and the Hebrew scriptures, but we kind of lose balance and forget about the words and the teachings and the works of our rabbi. Today what we're going to do is we're going to read 3 chapters. So everybody look at your neighbor and say 3 chapters.
3 chapters.
As we're reading, I'm going to add some commentary in, and we're just going to have a time of discussion about these 3 chapters, Matthew 26, 27, and then 28. So look at me with Matthew 26, if you would. And I've got up here behind me, does anyone know what city this is? Yeah, it just says it right there, right? City of Jerusalem. This is the city of Jerusalem during the times of Yeshua. Okay, this is an interactive map during the times of Yeshua. This is the first century Jerusalem. Matthew 26, verse 1. When Yeshua had finished speaking, he said to his Talmidim, his disciples, and a Talmid is more than just a student. It's someone who dedicates their life to the mimicry of their teacher. Okay? The imitation of their teacher. It's not just a student. It would be like if I was teaching school and one of my students followed me home and figured out what kind of car I drive. They went out and bought the same car. And then they got to my house and they looked at the windows and figure out what kind of food I eat. They would eat the same food. They'd figure out where I buy my clothes. They'd buy the clothes there. That it's complete imitation. It's more than just a student, okay? It's a Talmid. And actually, it shares the same root as a Tamid, which means eternal. Like we have a Ner Tamid in the temple, the eternal flame. A Talmid is someone who's, they're constantly trying to, it's a lifelong process of trying to imitate their master, their rabbi. So when Yeshua was finished speaking, he said to his Talmudim, as you know, Pesach is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over and nailed on an execution stake. Now, right then, the disciples of Yeshua, when they heard an execution stake or a cross or whatever the Greek is, they would have known exactly what he was talking about. Because back then, crucifixion was not a new thing. The Romans, what they did before days like Passover, before Shavuot, before Sukkot, all these pilgrimage holy days, what they would do is they would find all the criminals that they had locked up in prisons, and they would crucify them on either side of the road. So as you, as a family, were walking from, let's say, the Galilee up to Jerusalem, on either side of the road for miles would have been criminals crucified, some of them still living, some of them crying out to you and your family for help, some of them dead, some of them having vultures already picking the flesh off their bones. And you telling your kids, look down at the ground, look at them, don't look up at them. The Romans are sending a signal at that point. They're saying, if you come into the city and you cause trouble, this will be you. Crucifixion was a very familiar thing to Jews in that time. So when they heard the rabbi say that he would be nailed to an execution stake, I don't know that they really could grapple with that. I don't know that jived with them. Because we see that the disciples constantly have a hard time processing the death of their rabbi. They don't really fully accept it until they see him on a cross. So the head Kohanim, the head priest, and the elders of the people, that would be the Sanhedrin, that's the 70 elders, they gathered in the palace of Caiaphas. Caiaphas was the high priest. He was appointed as a high priest. He was not a son of Aaron. He was not a rightful high priest. He had a big palace, and I'll show you here on the map where that palace is. They actually have found his palace, and they actually have excavated portions of it. But right here is what we call the upper city of Jerusalem. This right here is Mount Zion. It's really high. This right here is Mount Moriah. The city of Jerusalem sat on two hills, Mount Zion and Mount Moriah. But right here on Mount Zion, this is the upper city. This is kind of where the upper echelons, the upper crust of the city, if you had money, this is where you built your house. And this is what we call the lower city. This is for commoners who lived in the city. All right? But Caiaphas, do you think he lived in the upper city or the lower city? Upper city, yeah. Let me zoom in, Rose. I'll show you Caiaphas' palace where they think it was. See if it takes us there. So right back here, I don't know if you can see this building. That is Herod's palace. That's Herod's palace. They think Caiaphas lived in one of these other homes right around in here. And you can kind of see the temple right here in the background. This would be Caiaphas' palace. So I wanted to give you some spatial, let you be able to see where it's at kind of on the map. Let me zoom back out to the thing. We'll keep reading. They made plans to arrest Yeshua surreptitiously, which means kind of like secretively, and have him put to death. But they said, not during the festival, or the people will riot. They don't want to riot on their hands because that will upset the balance. They have it pretty good. The priests have it good. They're protected by the Romans. They're wealthy. They have a sweet gig going on. And if they cause a riot, the Romans will say, all right, enough's enough. Let's end all this temple worship system. You priests, you don't have a place in the city. And it would kind of upset the balance of everything. They don't want to start a riot. Yeshua was in Beit Anya. Now, Beit Anya would be back over here about where the speaker is at, over on the other side of the Mount of Olives. Here you have the Mount of Olives. Beit Anya would be back around over here. It's a little village. And he's at Beit Anya, and he's at the home of Shimon, the man who had sara'at, or leprosy, as some translations might say. A woman who had an alabaster jar filled with very expensive perfume approached Yeshua while he was eating and began pouring it on his head. And then verse 8. Then the Talmudim saw it. They became very angry. Why this waste, they asked. This could have been sold for a lot of money and given to the poor. But Yeshua, aware of what was going on, said to them, why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing for me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. She poured this perfume on me to prepare my body for its burial. Yes, I tell you that throughout the whole world, even in Dothan, Alabama, wherever this good news is proclaimed, what she has done will be told in her memory. Verse 14, then one of the 12, the one called Yehuda from Kiriots. Now let's stop there. The other way people call him, the other title people give him is Judas Iscariot, right? They think that maybe he could have been from the town of Kiriots, or his name Iscariot comes from the fact that maybe he was affiliated with a group of insurrectionists called the Sicarii. The Sicarii means a dagger. They had these long curved daggers they would hide in their coats, and they were assassins. And they would go to people who were in collusion with the Romans, or sometimes even Romans themselves, but mainly people like tax collectors, like Matthew, who was another one of the 12. They would sneak up on them and they would stab them in the back with their Sicarii, their dagger, because they were in collusion. They were in cahoots with the Romans. They were assassins. It's presumed that maybe Judas was one of those men. So you can just imagine Judas Sicarii sitting around a campfire with Matthew, the tax collector. They were arch enemies at one point, if that theory is true. But anyways, Judas goes to the head Kohanim, the priest, and he said to them, "What are you willing to give me if I turn Yeshua over to you?" And they counted out 30 silver coins and gave them to Yehuda. And from then on, he looked for a good opportunity to betray Yeshua. As Pesach was approaching, as Passover was approaching, the Talmudim came to Yeshua and said, "Where do you want us to prepare for your Seder?" He said, "Go into the city, Jerusalem, to so-and-so," he replied, "and tell him that the rabbi says, 'My time is near. My Talmudim and I are celebrating Pesach at your house.'" The Talmudim did as Yeshua directed and prepared the Seder. Verse 20. When evening came, Yeshua reclined with the 12 Talmudim. And as they were eating, he said, "Yes, I tell you that one of you is going to betray me." And they became terribly upset and began asking him one after the other, "Lord, you don't mean me, do you?" He answered, "The one who dips his matzah in the dish with me is the one who will betray me. The Son of Man will die just as the Tanakh says he will. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for him had he never been born." Yehuda, the one who was betraying him, then asked, "Surely, Rabbi, you don't mean me?" And he answered, "The words are yours." Verse 26, while they were eating, Yeshua took a piece of matzah, just like we did last night. And he made a bracha, he made a blessing, and he broke it. And he gave it to the Talmudim, and he said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And also he took a cup of wine. He made the bracha, and he gave it to them, saying, where am I at? Take and drink. I just lost my place. "All of you drink from it, for this is my blood, which ratifies the new covenants." Now, that new covenant he's talking about is Jeremiah chapter 31. In Hebrew, that's called a Brit Chadashah. Brit Chadashah. It means a renewal of a covenant. It's not anything completely new. It's a renewal. The Hebrew word for the month or the moon is Chodesh. And every month we have a new moon. But is it a different celestial body that's taken out and new one put in? It just renews itself, right? That's the concept of a chadashah, a brit, a covenant, chadashah, a renewal of a covenant, right? He wants to renew his vows with Israel. He says, "My blood shed on the behalf of many, so that they may have their sins forgiven. I tell you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine again until the day I drink new wine with you in my Father's kingdom." Now, what he's talking about there is the wine of the Messianic kingdom. The Messianic kingdom is going to be the ultimate source of joy. And wine is just a picture of joy, right? And just like he turns the water into wine, what he's doing is he's pulling elements from the kingdom backward into time, and he's bringing them and giving everybody a taste of the Messianic kingdom here and now. And what he's saying, though, is like, I will not be tasting that until I'm in my Father's kingdom. In verse 30, after singing the Hallel, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Now, singing the Hallel, the Hallel is traditional. It's Psalms 113 through Psalms 118. And let me take you back to the temple here. So Yeshua and his followers were down here, more than likely in the lower city. You can see here on the map behind me. They're down here in the lower city. They're probably dining and having the meal for Passover. And they come up the road. Yeah, and so they come here to the temple steps. These are what's called the southern steps of the temple. And what they did is they sung a psalm for each step as they progressed up the steps leading up to the temple. So when Yeshua walks out of the house, they go up to the southern steps and they begin to sing the Hallel. And they're singing through Psalms 113 to 118, and they get to the top. And it says, they probably get up there and they probably pray. They probably have a time of fellowship together. And then it says, where did they go from there? They went out to the Mount of Olives. Now, from there, they probably exited this gate here and went out to the Mount of Olives. Now, the Mount of Olives was a special place because, let's go over to the Mount of Olives and I'll show you. You had a really good view of the temple, right? This is the Mount of Olives, but the Mount of Olives was another special. Does anybody remember what took place on the Mount of Olives? It was kind of like an on-demand sacrifice that only took place on the Mount of Olives. The red heifer. That took place out here on the Mount of Olives. Now, this map does not have it, but originally there was actually a bridge that came out of this eastern gate and spanned all the way across right here below us to the Mount of Olives, to the top of the Mount of Olives. Why would they have a bridge? Because in the times of Yeshua, this was a burial ground. This was littered with caves that were dug, and they are still there. They're dug into the side of this mountain. And you can see that whoever created this app actually did some of them. They're dug into the side of this dug in the side of this mountain. And if the priest were to walk out there, offer the sacrifice of the red heifer, and then walk through a cemetery, they would redefile themselves ritually, and they would not be able to go into the presence of God. And they would have to wait 7 days, and they wouldn't be effective as priests. So what they did is they created a bridge that spanned all the way across, and it's called the Bridge of the Priests. It's just not in this app here. But he goes out to the Mount of Olives, and I want to kind of show you spatially what that looks like.
Is that bridge there today?
No, it's not there today.
I didn't
No.
think so.
We think the Romans maybe destroyed it. So he probably came out of this gate here and he came down. I wanted to show you how steep that was, though. And
Wow.
if you come to Israel, if you go to Israel, you'll experience that.
Yeah.
You can walk down into that Kidron Valley and then back up the Mount of Olives. The topography, it's completely lost on you unless you go there. It's just amazing how steep of a drop it is and how steep of an incline it is. I mean, they were probably out of breath when they did that, but I was. So after singing, they went to the Mount of Olives. Yeshua then said to them, "Tonight you will lose faith in me. As the Tanakh says, I will strike the shepherd dead, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered." Verse 32. "But after I have been raised, I will go ahead of you into the Galilee." "I will never lose faith in you," Peter replied, "even if everyone else does." Yeshua said to him, "Yes, I tell you that tonight, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. Now that's problematic there because, number one, he's denouncing Yeshua, right? And Yeshua is predicting that will happen. But there's another problematic part of that, and that is that roosters are illegal in the city of Jerusalem. So how could Peter hear a rooster crow? There's confusion over this text because the Hebrew word for a rooster is a gabor. And the Hebrew word for a man is a gaver. And so what's happening here is Yeshua is not talking about a chicken, because chickens were outlawed in the city of Jerusalem. He's talking about the gabor that would wake up early at dawn every morning, and he would go to the top of the temple, and he would stand and look out over the city, and he would he would sing loudly 3 things, and he would wake up the entire city like a rooster would. And he would say these 3 things: "All priests, prepare to sacrifice. All Levites to their stations. And all Israelites come to worship." That was the rooster that would crow 3 times. He would do that 3 times every morning and wake up the entire city of Jerusalem. That add a little bit of context on what Peter was denouncing there was not only Yeshua, but he was denouncing the very essence of what it is and how to worship as an Israelite, as a true Israelite. And imagine that just hit him like a bag of bricks, right? When he heard that guy stand up and say those 3 things again, here he is denouncing and denying his association with the Messiah of Israel. So,
What are the 3 things?
yeah, all priests prepare to sacrifice, all Levites to their stations, and all Israelites come to worship. And he would have stood up and said those 3 things 3 times. And he is the rooster. He is the gabor. the temple crier, as they call him. Okay, so where are we at here? You'll have to keep me on track. What verse am I on? 35? Oh yeah, 36. Then Yeshua went with his Talmudim to a place called Gat Shemen. Now, in English, that's Gethsemane? Gethsemane? I can't even say it in English. That's right down here. So he leaves the Mount of Olives. You guys see how far of a drop that is down there? Right down there's the brook of Kidron. There's water down there. So that's a good place to grow olives. There's an olive grove down there. It also became the place where you would press olives. And you would smush the olives to get the oil out of the olives. Because Gat Shemen, it literally means the place of pressing. The place of pressing for oil. Shemen is oil. Gat means the pressing. So he's going down to the place of the oil presses. So you can actually go there to this day, and there's olive trees all around that date back to the time of Yeshua. There's still olive trees growing there. But it's really interesting when you know that that place was full of olive trees and oil presses. What does he go down there to do? It says he went down there to pray, and he took with him Kepha, or Peter, and Zabdi's 2 sons, which are James and John. He took 3 of them. Grief and anguish came over him, and he said to them, "My heart is so filled with sadness that I could die. Remain here and stay awake with me. Go on a little farther." And he fell on his face praying, "My Father, if possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want." He returned to the Talmudim and found them sleeping. And he said to Kepha, "Were you so weak that you couldn't stay awake with me for even an hour? Stay awake and pray that you will not be put to the test. The spirit indeed is eager, but human nature is weak." And a second time he went off and he prayed, "My Father, if this cup cannot pass away unless I drink it, let what you want be done." And again he returned and found them sleeping. Their eyes were so heavy. You know, after a good Passover meal, right, you're tired, just hits your stomach, and you're like, "Oh, I'm tired." That's what happened to them. Leaving them again, he went off and he prayed a third time, saying the same words. Then he came to the Talmudim and he said, "For now, go on sleeping. Take your rest. Look, the time has come for the Son of Man to be betrayed into the hands of sinners." Verse 46, "Get up, let's go. Here comes my betrayer." This is all happening in the dead of night, in the middle of the night, right here, as you see on the screen, in Gat Shemen. While Yeshua was still speaking, Yehuda, one of the 12, he came with him a large crowd carrying swords and clubs from the head Kohanim and the elders of the people. The betrayer, Judas, he had arranged to give them a signal. He said, "The man that I kiss is the one you want. Grab him." He went straight up to Yeshua and he said, "Shalom, Rabbi," and he kissed him. And Yeshua said to him, "Friend, do what you came to do." Then they moved forward, laid hold of Yeshua, and arrested him. And at that, one of the men with Yeshua reached for his sword. Now, this is probably more than likely a Roman short sword, which was the equivalent of like one of us having, like a M4 or something like that, like the U.S. Army, like a standard issue weapon, right? Like an infantry weapon. One of us busting out an M4 and holding somebody up with that, right? And saying like maybe taking a shot at him kind of thing. And he chops off the guy's ear. I mean, where did they get that sword from, first of all? And she was like, "Put that away." You don't understand what I'm trying to do. I'm not taking the kingdom by force like you're hoping I'm going to do. Put that away. I have to die. I'll come with the sword later, right? And so he drew it out, and he struck the servant of the Kohen Hagadol, the high priest, and he cut off his ear. And Yeshua said to him, "Put your sword back where it belongs, for everyone who uses the sword will die by the sword. Don't you know that I can ask my Father, and he will instantly provide more than a dozen armies of angels to help me?" Verse 54, "But if I did that, how could the passages of the Tanakh be fulfilled that say it has to happen this way?" And right there's an important lesson, because so many times we see an opportunity and it fits our agenda, but it doesn't fit God's word. And we might seize that opportunity, right? And Satan loves to do that. He loves to put opportunities and open doors for us. This is where you're supposed to go. But God's will and God's word is supreme. And Yeshua knew that the Tanakh, the Messianic prophecies in the Tanakh needed to be fulfilled before he could take by force what was his and what he deserved. So, verse 55, "Then Yeshua addressed the crowd. 'So you came out to take me with swords and clubs, the way you would a leader of a rebellion. Every day I sat in the temple court teaching, and you didn't seize me then. But all this happened so that the prophets, what the prophets wrote would be fulfilled. Then the Talmudim all deserted him and ran away. And those who had seized Yeshua led him off to Caiaphas, the Cohen Hagadol, the high priest. So we're going back now into the city. They take them back up into Mount Moriah, through the city gate, into the home. Remember where I showed you right here, the home of Caiaphas, the palace. They take him there. And he went inside, and he went down with the guards to see what the outcome would be. The head Kohanim, the head priest, and the whole Sanhedrin, that's 70 men, they looked for some false evidence against Yeshua so that they might put him to death. Now, the Sanhedrin at that time was 70 elders. There were 65 that were Sadducees. 5 of them at that time were Pharisees. There was a big difference between them theologically speaking. Big difference. It's interesting, too, that of the 5 Pharisees that sat on the Sanhedrin, 3 of them are named and are sympathetic to the cause that Yeshua has. They're sympathetic, if not a participatory in the Yeshua movement. We have Nicodemus, we have Gamliel, and we have possibly Joseph of Arimathea. All 3 participating in, or at least sympathetic to, the Yeshua movement. 3 of the 5 Pharisees that sat on the Sanhedrin. I thought that's interesting. Where am I at? You guys just got to spit out the verses here that I'm on.
It's interesting that they believed in an afterlife.
Yeah, they believe in the resurrection of the dead.
Versus the Sadducees.
The Sadducees did not, yeah. This man said, I can tear down. Finally, they found 2 people who said, I can tear down God's temple and build it again in 3 days. And the Cohen Hagadol stood up and said, have you nothing to say to the accusations these men are making against you? And Yeshua remained silent. And the Cohen Gadol, he said to him, I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Mashiach, the anointed one, the Savior, the Son of God. And Yeshua said to him, the words are your own. But I tell you that one day you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of Hagavurah, of the might, and coming on the clouds of heaven. The Son of Man, this title is used all through the Gospels. He's tying it back to Daniel chapter 7. You go back and look at Daniel chapter 7 at some point and read. That's a very messianic title. So he's calling himself not only the Messiah, but he's also calling himself the Son of God, and that he will come on the clouds of heaven. You think that sat well with him? At this, the Cohen Gadol tore his robes, which is against the Torah to do. Right? Blasphemy, he said. Why do we still need witnesses? You heard him blaspheme. What is your verdict? Guilty, they answered. He deserves death. And they spit in his face and pounded him with their fists. And those who were beating him said, now, you Messiah, prophesy to us. Who hit you that time? Verse 69, Kepha was sitting outside in the courtyard. And Mark's gospel says that he was warming himself by a fire. When a servant girl came up to him, she says, you too were with Yeshua from the Galilee, she said. But he denied it in front of everyone. I don't know what you're talking about. He went on out into the porch. Another girl saw him and said to the people there, this man was with Yeshua of Nazareth. And again he denied it, swearing, I don't know the man. And after a little while, the bystanders approached Kepha and said, you must be one of them. Your accent gives you away. Now, why does he have a different accent from the people in the Jerusalem? Because the people up in the Galilee, they spoke a certain dialect of what's called Galilean Aramaic. And the people in Jerusalem spoke a more pure Hebrew language, a more pure Hebrew dialect. So someone coming from the Galilee, it would be like here, for instance, I was just out in Pike County. Any Pike County people in the room? It's right, Brundage. I think I was out past Troy. I was west of Troy. And out there is just like good old country folk, right? But 3 people, for the first time since living in Alabama, 3 people asked me where I was from, and I said, why? And they said, because of your accent. And I was like, I don't think I have an accent. You know, I would see myself as having a lack of an accent, but to them I had an accent because I was in their territory, you know? And I didn't have that thick Pike County accent, you know? And that's the same thing. It's like me going to Pike County. It's like the Galileans coming to Jerusalem. And it's a 3-day walk from the Galilee down to Jerusalem. It's a pretty good geographical distance there. So the different dialects developed over time. And so he was coming down and he's speaking Galilean Aramaic. And meanwhile, they're speaking more of a pure Hebrew tongue. And they single him out. And they say, your accent is giving you away.
I'll keep driving.
Yeah, what?
I'll keep driving. I don't want to walk.
Yeah. This time he began to invoke a curse upon him as he swore, I don't know the man. And immediately the temple crier cried out. He said, all priests prepare your sacrifice. All Levites to their stations. And all Israelites come to worship. And he went outside and he cried bitterly. That's a low point for Peter, right? But it's really neat. There's redemption that comes after Yeshua rises, and he appears to the disciples as they're out in a boat fishing in the Sea of Galilee. And who's the first person to jump off the boat? Peter is. And he swims to shore. Even before the boat can land, he's the first one there. And there's a beautiful moment of redemption through that. So chapter 27. Are you all digging this so far? Is this cool?
Yes.
Want to keep going? Chapter 27. Early in the morning, all the head priests, the Kohanim, and the elders met to plan how to bring about Yeshua's death. They put him in chains and led him away and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. Now, Pilate was a Roman, and he lived in Caesarea Philippi, out by the ocean, by the Mediterranean Sea. He lived in a very fancy city. He only came to Jerusalem during high holy days to serve as the governor. Because if there was going to be a riot, if there was going to be a rebellion, it's going to be during the high holy days. He came there because he wanted to help govern the city of Jerusalem. So he's there. He just happens to be there. When Yehuda, who had betrayed him, saw that Yeshua had been condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the head Kohanim and the elders, saying, I sinned in betraying an innocent man to death. Now, why is he remorseful? I have a theory that Judas did not want Yeshua to die, and that he was betraying Yeshua to start the rebellion that Judas wanted to see happen. Because he knew that if he could just ignite a spark, that there would be a rebellion in the city of Jerusalem, people would take up arms, and Yeshua would take his throne in a forceful way. That's my theory. I don't think he meant for Yeshua to be nailed to a cross and executed like he did. That's just my theory. Now, many times we try to take the kingdom by force, right? And that's just not how it goes. Sometimes we have to suffer to bring other people in, just like Yeshua had to suffer to bring people closer to the presence of God and reconcile. So, what is that to us? They answered. I'm on verse 5 now. That's your problem. So hurling the piece of silver into the sanctuary, he left, and then he went off and hanged himself. Verse 6, the head Kohanim took the silver coins and said, it is prohibited to put this into the temple sanctuary. They're so concerned about that, aren't they? They're okay with crucifying an innocent man, right? The Messiah of Israel, but they don't want blood money to get back into the treasury. Talk about priorities being off, right? So they decided to use it to buy the potter's field as a cemetery for foreigners. That's so kind of them. And this is how it came to be called the Field of Blood, as the name still bears today. Then, when Zechariah the prophet spoke, was fulfilled, and they took the 30 pieces of silver coins, which was the price the people of Israel had agreed to pay for him, and used them to buy the potter's field, just as the Lord directed me. Verse 11. Meanwhile, Yeshua was brought before the governor, Pilate, right? And the governor was probably, where was Pilate when all this was going down? See this corner right here? That's an outpost. That's a Roman outpost that sat at the corner of the temple complex. This right here is all the Temple Mount. It's 36 acres of plateau that was built out by Solomon and later by Herod. And then the Romans, to kind of spite them, put a tall citadel right there where they could stand up on the citadel and they could see right down to the altar and watch everything that was happening. Here's a Roman guard, and they could look up over the city. But you see, if someone was sitting at this guy right here, he could look down and look at the altar, and that enraged the priests that the Romans could sit down like this. So Here they are looking over the city, watching for any riots that break out. But down inside this Antonia fortress is where Pilate probably was talking to Yeshua. That's probably where this was all taking place. So they went from Caiaphas' house, right here. They probably walked through here and got to the Antonia fortress. And this is where this is happening. I want to show you that just kind of spatially so you can see it. So Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Yeshua answered, "The words are yours." But when he was accused by the head Kohanim and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Don't you hear all these charges they are making against you?" But to the governor's great amazement, he did not say a single word in reply to the accusations. It was the governor's custom during a festival to set free one prisoner, whomever the crowd asked for. There was at that time a notorious prisoner being held by the name of Yeshua bar Abba. Where am I getting Yeshua from? That's because early translators, some of your translations don't have the name Jesus in there or Yeshua in there in the book of Matthew, but his name was Yeshua bar Abba. All scholars agree that this criminal was Yeshua bar Abba, which means Yeshua, son of the Father. This guy was not just a petty theft. Okay, this guy was like an Osama bin Laden of the Jewish people. He was like someone who was an insurrectionist. He was an insurgent who was trying to forcibly start a rebellion. That's Yeshua bar Abba. He was not just a petty theft. So here he brings out Yeshua bar Abba. So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Who do you want me to set free from you? Yeshua bar Abba, Yeshua, the son of the Father, or Yeshua, son of the Father?" You see that? And who did they choose? They said Yeshua, called the Messiah, for he understood that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. And while he was sitting in court, his wife sent him a message: "Leave that innocent man alone." Husbands, sometimes your wives are wise. "Today, in a dream, most times, I suffered terribly because of him." So it's interesting that Pilate's wife had a dream about Yeshua of Nazareth, right? But the head Kohanim persuaded the crowd to ask for Yeshua bar Abba instead. And they said to have Yeshua of Nazareth executed on a stake. Do you see the theme there? They're constantly trying to take the kingdom by force. And it's interesting, too, that if this guy got out, what's another, like a terrorist guy? What's the name of another terrorist guy other than Osama bin Laden? Who? Mahmoud Abbas, yeah. So this guy gets out. I mean, some of these guys that we're detaining at Gitmo in Cuba, if we just let them out and we give them a free ride back to Afghanistan or back to Iraq, what are they going to do? Do you think they're completely reformed?
Heck no.
Probably not. They've been sitting in Guantanamo Bay for the past several years, and they're just as mad, if not 10 times as madder at the United States of America. They're probably going to find their old buddies, right? And probably get into trouble again, right? Do you think that's what Yeshua bar Abba did? And we see just 40 years later, Titus, the Roman Emperor Titus, is so fed up with Jerusalem and all their little rebellions that he finally just levels the entire city. I don't know. I think Yeshua bar Abba probably had a play in that. And all these little rebellions kept popping up, and finally Romans were like, "We're done with it. Just level the city." And that's what happened. What goes around comes around, I guess. He said, okay, so bar Abba did an execution stake. When he asked, I'm on verse 23, when he asked, "Why? What crime has he committed?" And they shouted all the louder, "Put him to death on a stake." And when Pilate saw that he was accomplishing nothing, but rather that a riot was starting, he took water, washed his hands in front of the crowd, and said, "My hands are clean of this man's blood. It's your responsibility." Verse 25, all the people answered, "His blood is on us and our children." Verse 26, then he released to them Barabbas. But Yeshua, the other Yeshua, son of the Father, after having him whipped, he handed him over to be executed on a stake. Verse 27, the governor's soldiers took Yeshua into the headquarters building, and the whole battalion gathered around him. They stripped him of his clothes and put on him a scarlet robe. They're mocking him. They wove thorn branches together and shoved it on his head and put a stick in his right hand. And they kneeled down in front of him and used the stick to beat him around the head. And they said, "Hail to the King of the Jews!" And they spit on him, and they used a stick to beat him on the head. And when they had finished ridiculing him, they took off the robe, put on his own clothes, and led him away to be nailed on an execution stake. And as they were leaving, they met a man from Cyrene named Shimon, and they forced him to carry Yeshua's execution stake. And they arrived at a place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull. Now, many people think that this is out north. Well, first of all, some of the medieval tradition says it's somewhere within the city itself. In the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, that maybe his crucifixion happened there, his death, burial, and resurrection happened around there. But some people say it's out the garden tomb out north, about right here, outside the city gates. That's probably more likely. But another theory that I kind of like is right here on the Mount of Olives.
Yeah.
It's already a cemetery there. It's already a burial ground. There's all kinds of caves that were hewn into the rock. I have a theory that that's probably where he was crucified, but it doesn't say explicitly, so we're not going to get hung up on it, and we're not going to fight over it. It's not a matter of salvation. It's just let me take you back out there and show you some of these caves that are hewn into the side.
Do you have a picture of Golgotha?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
That's such a cool thing.
But let me show you some of these burial caves, and it still looks like this to this day.
Yeah.
When you go to the Mount of Olives, see all those caves? These are all burial caves. This is the largest cemetery in the world. Something like 70 to 80, they're not even sure how many people are buried. So 70 to 80,000 people they know are buried somewhere on this mountain. This is Absalom's pillar.
Right.
Different kings of Israel are buried out here. These elaborate markers. And this is still, all these are still here to this day. You can go there and walk around them, and you can go and touch them and everything. But all those caves are there. There's headstones everywhere. The Jordanians came in the 60s and took all those headstones and crushed them. They pulverized them. They used them to build buildings just to kind of stick an eye in the...
It's not that easy to get down there, though.
No, it's not.
Like you were saying, it's very steep.
Yeah, it is. So I have a theory that, the road comes from Jericho into Jerusalem right through here. And maybe he was crucified here as like an example to people coming in from Jericho to the city. I don't know. I
What
can't...
about the prop when it talks about putting him outside the camp, leper king outside the camp,
Yeah.
moving the leper
I would say
around?
it's definitely outside the city of Jerusalem. Yeah, he was definitely crucified outside the city of Jerusalem. What verse am I on, guys? Tell me.
34.
34, thank you. They gave him wine mixed with bitter gall to drink, but after tasting it, he would not drink it. And after they nailed him to the stake, they divided his clothes among them by throwing dice. Then they sat down to keep watch over him there. And above his head they placed the written notice stating the charge against him, which was this: "This is Yeshua, the King of the Jews." Now they wrote this sign in 3 languages. How do I know that? Because the other Gospels mention that. And I believe it's Hebrew, Aramaic, and Latin. Did we establish? I think, yeah. Latin or Greek, I think it's Latin. If we take the Hebrew, I did this several months back. If we take the Hebrew, it would be Yeshua HaMelech, what is it? Yeshua HaMelech HaYehudim. Yeshua HaNotzri V'Melech HaYehudim. Yeshua of Nazareth, King of the Jews. If we take the first letter of each of those words, it spells the name of God. Yud, He, Vav, He. Yeshua HaNotzri of Nazareth. V'Melech, the King. HaYehudim, the Jews. Yud, He, Vav, He. Forms an acrostic. Then 2 robbers were placed on an execution stake with him, one on the right and one on the left. People passing by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So you can destroy the temple, can you, and rebuild it in 3 days? Save yourself if you are the Son of God, and come down from the stake." Likewise, the head Kohanim, they jeered at him, along with the Torah teachers and the elders. He saved others, but he can't save himself. So he's king of Israel, is he? Let him come down from the stake, then we'll believe him. He trusted God, so let him rescue him if he wants him. After all, he did say, "I am the Son of God." Even the robbers nailed up with him insulted him in the same way. From noon, everybody say prayer time.
Prayer time.
Noon. Till about 3 o'clock, everybody say prayer time.
Prayer time.
All the land was covered with darkness. At about 3, which is one of the prayer times, which is when the one of the offerings is being offered in the temple at the same exact time, Yeshua offers up a loud cry. Ali, Ali, lama shavachthani. My God, why have you deserted me? And he's quoting Psalms 22. On hearing this, and we got a whole teaching on the worm, the Tola'at worm, which is so fascinating, and we're not going to go into today. On hearing this, some of the bystanders said, he is calling for Eliyahu. Immediately, one of them ran and took a sponge and soaked it in vinegar and put it on a stick and gave it him to drink. The rest said, wait, let's see if Eliyahu comes to rescue him. But Yeshua, again, crying out a loud voice, yielded up his spirits. And at that moment, the perachot in the temple, the veil in the temple was ripped in two from top to bottom, and there was an earthquake with rocks splitting apart. Also, the graves were opened up, just like the graves in the Mount of Olives there. So that would be the perfect place that those graves were opened up, that people could see them. The graves were opened, and bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. And after Yeshua rose, they came out of the graves and went into the holy city where many people saw them. When the Roman officer and those with him who were keeping watch over Yeshua saw the earthquake and what was happening, they were awestruck and said, he really is the Son of God. Verse 55, then there were many women there, looking on from a distance. They had followed Yeshua from the Galilee, helping him. Among them were Miriam from Magdala, Miriam, the mother of Yaakov and Yosef, and the mother of Zabdi's sons. Just a little tidbit, we can pinpoint 6 unique Miriams from the Gospels that followed Yeshua. That's just women named Miriam that follow Yeshua. There's 6 unique Miriams. That's why it's so confusing sometimes when you come across the name Miriam. Towards evening, there came a wealthy man from Arimathea named Yosef. Now, Yosef was pious because he knows his Torah. And Torah, Deuteronomy 21, says, do not leave someone on a tree overnight. He's a pious man. He himself was a Talmid of Yeshua, a disciple of Yeshua. He approached Pilate, the governor, and asked for Yeshua's body, and Pilate ordered it to be given to him. Yosef took the body, wrapped it in clean linen, and laid it in his own tomb, which he had recently been cut into the rock, just like we see here in the Mount of Olives. After rolling a large stone in front of the entrance to the tomb, he went away. Miriam of Magdala and the other Miriam stayed there, sitting opposite his grave. We're talking probably either a Wednesday afternoon or a Thursday afternoon that all this is happening, right before Pesach. So as they are sacrificing and slaughtering the Pesach lambs in the temple, Yeshua is giving up his last breath on a cross outside the city. Now, we have a problem here because Joseph of Arimathea has not celebrated and not eaten the Passover lamb yet. It isn't Passover yet, but he's touching a dead body. He ritually is making himself impure, and he cannot go into the temple. He's touched Yeshua's body. That's some serious commitment to his rabbi, right? Fortunately, you remember thousands of years before this, somebody was contaminated by the body of someone else. Anybody remember? Remember the bones of Joseph? They carried him out of Egypt. And the men said, we cannot celebrate Passover because we were contaminated with Joseph's body. But what happened? And God created what's called Pesach Shani, the second Passover, for those who are defiled for the death of someone. So Joseph of Arimathea, let's play this out here. Joseph of Arimathea can't celebrate Passover that night because he's defiled. He cannot eat the Passover lamb. He cannot go into the temple and bring a lamb because he's been defiled with Yeshua's body. But he can do the Pesach Sheni, which is going to come 30 days later. Which is interesting to me because is Yeshua risen at that point? And Yeshua is there appearing to his disciples, right? So I don't know, I picture how that went down as he's celebrating the next Passover 30 days later by himself because he defiled himself with the body of his rabbi. I don't know, that would be so cool if Yeshua just popped in and was like, thank you, by the way. Right? That's neat.
That is neat.
What verse am I on? Let me tell me. 62. Next day, after the preparation, the head Kohanim and the Pharisees went together to Pilate, and they said, Sir, we remember that this deceiver said while he was still alive, after 3 days I will be raised. Therefore, order that the grave be made secure till the 3rd day, Otherwise, the Talmudim may come, steal him away, and say to the people, he was raised from the dead, and the last deception will be worse than the first. And Pilate said to them, you may have your guard. Go and make the grave secure, as you know how. So they went and made the grave secure by sealing the stone and putting a guard on watch. How many of you know they didn't secure it well enough? Right? So as we wrap up for the day here, I want to ask you a question before we get on to Matthew chapter 28. We are first century disciples of Yeshua. All right, put yourself in that position. Suddenly, it becomes very unpopular to be a follower of Yeshua of Nazareth. You saw, maybe from a distance, you saw his body hanging on a cross. You saw his lifeless body being taken down, wrapped in a sheet, and being put in one of these tombs. And a huge stone rolled in front of it, and guards put in front of it. What do you do now? Do you trust the words of your rabbi, that he would rebuild and he would rise on the third day? And do you hold firm to the testimony of what he said and who he is? And these are some of the darkest hours. 3 long days have to go by before he reappears and before he busts out of that tomb. And in those 3 days, it's where your faith really meets the road. Because suddenly, the whole world seems against you. Suddenly, all of Jerusalem, the leaders of your people, your nation, say you're a criminal for following this false king, this false Messiah who is executed like a criminal. Now, some of you in this room, I've talked to you and I know this. Some of you, by following Yeshua, have been cut off by people in your family. By being cut off by friends, by colleagues, by former pastors, or whatever have you. But can you just imagine the entire nation, all the leaders of that nation being against you, and having the faith to trust and know, I got to hold out for 3 days. That's all I got to do is hold out for 3 days.
You know, the other thing is that Yeshua a lot of times spoke in very cryptic language. So
Yeah.
I've often wondered if all the disciples really got it.
How much of that,
and
yeah.
had that to comfort them in those
Yeah.
3 days.
Probably not,
Even
yeah.
understand.
Yeah. So I'm going to leave you with this question before we read and finish up in Matthew chapter 28. Are we, just like them, betting everything on Yeshua? Just like the Israelites betted everything on the blood of the Lamb on their doorpost, are we betting everything on the blood of the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world? And are we holding firm despite all kinds of adversity, despite the whole world seeming like it's crushing down on us? Are we holding firm till his return? So verse 28, the story does not end. After Shabbat, as the next day was dawning, Miriam of Magdala. Now, Miriam of Magdala was a woman of ill repute, to put it nicely. And the other Miriam went to see the grave. Suddenly there was a violent earthquake, for an angel of Adonai came down from heaven, rolled away the stone, and he sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were as white as snow. The guards were so terrified at him that they trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the woman, "Don't be afraid. I know that you're looking for Yeshua, who was executed on a stake. He is not here, but he's been raised, just as he said. Come and look at the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell the other Talmudim. He has been raised from the dead, and now he's going to the Galilee ahead of you. You will see him there. Now I have told you." So they left the tomb quickly, frightened, yet filled with joy. And they ran to give the news to the Talmudim. Suddenly, Yeshua met them and said, "Shalom." And they came up and took hold of his feet, and they laid down in front of him. Then Yeshua said to them, "Don't be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to the Galilee, and they will see me there." It's interesting to me that Yeshua reveals himself the very first time to two Miriams, right? It's kind of like a good bookend. The two Miriams in the garden. It's a good bookend to Eve in the garden, right?
Yes.
It's interesting when you think about that. It's the undoing of Eve in the garden. As they were going, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the head priest everything that had happened. And they met with the elders, and after discussing the matter, they gave the soldiers a sizable sum of money and said to them, tell people, his Talmudim came during the night and stole his body while they were sleeping. If the governor hears of it, he will put things right with him and keep you from getting in trouble. Verse 15, the soldiers took the money and did as they were told. And this story has been spread about by Judeans till this very day. Verse 16, so the 11 Talmudim went to the hill in the Galilee where Yeshua had told them to go. And when they saw him, they prostrated themselves before him. But some of them hesitated. And Yeshua came and talked with them. And he said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make people from all nations into Talmudim, immersing them into the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I will be with you always, even until the end of this age. So, in closing, we see a template here of salvation. There's the blood of the Lamb that we apply. There's immersion in water. Then there's the bringing out. Just like the Israelites were brought out of the sea, they were taken to the mountain and given the what? The Torah. They were given the Word of God. And then they were brought into the Promised Land. We do the same thing. That is the template of our salvation. We apply the blood of the Lamb on our hearts. We immerse in water, just like some of you did Sunday. Then we go to the mountain and we receive the Torah. We receive His Word. And then we enter the kingdom sometime later. Hopefully soon in our days. But if you get any of those four things out of order, or you skip one of those things, or you don't complete all four steps, you are incomplete. Or you turn into some kind of spawn of Satan. If you skip the blood of the Lamb, you skip the water, and you go straight to the mountain, and you go straight to the Torah and the commandments, you turn into a legalistic Pharisee, a know-it-all. What I like to call a Torah Nazi. But the idea is to go through all four in that particular order. The blood of the Lamb, the water of immersion, the mountain, and then the promise, the kingdom, right? It's important that we remember that. If you've gotten any of those out of order, I plead for you to go back to the beginning and redo it all. Start from fresh and redo the whole thing. One of the things that we will be doing as a community between now and Shavuot, which is in 50 days, we're going to be counting the Omer every day like we're commanded to do. We have to count every day up to 50 and then celebrate Shavuot, or Acts chapter 2, the anniversary of the giving of the Torah. We are going to fundraise for a Torah scroll, a kosher Torah scroll. Our community needs to be centered around the Torah, needs to be centered around the Word of God. And this is a Torah scroll. We've already got our eyes set on one. It's 180 years old. It's in Israel, or made in Israel. And we're going to need about $3,000 to buy it. But guys, this is going to be with us after I'm gone, after all of you are gone. This is something that our grandkids will take with them. We will use it for bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs. We'll use it for getting out and reading as often as we want. This is something that was written on kosher parchment by hand and took someone about 3 years to actually write by hand. And so from now until Shavuot, we as a community are going to do our best to raise that money to purchase that Torah scroll and have it shipped to the United States of America, to Dothan, Alabama, and be the center of our community. Just like Yeshua is the center of our community, He is the Word made flesh, and His Word will be the center of our community. Everything will revolve around that. Okay? So that is our goal, and we're gonna reach out to like our online community. There's people who listen to teachings online, I guess, and watch things online. We're gonna reach out to them and ask if they would be willing to give, and yeah.
Why don't you do the fundraising for the cabinet and I'll buy the scroll for you?
What? Do what?
He said if you'll do fundraising.
Fundraise for the cabinet to keep it, and then I'll buy the scroll for the
Noticed it. You're saying fundraise for the cabinet and you will buy the scroll?
Yep.
The Lord will buy it for you guys. So my savings, I got money for God's thing.
Amen.
Hallelujah.
We'll figure it all out. Okay.
Just say thank you.
Let's
expect that. Thank you.
Todah Rabah.
I'm half confused, half in shock, I guess.
I'm sure.
Wow. Praise God. Let's close in prayer, and then we're going to do Kiddush. Thank you guys for your attention today. And remember, it all starts with the blood of the Lamb. And like we celebrated last night, without that, we've got nothing. We're estranged from the covenants and the promises of the God of Israel. And that's step one. That's the door to get in. Let's pray. Thank God today for that. Avinu Malkeinu, Father, I'm just so humbled and honored to be in the midst of believers who are the type of people who have faith to hold out for the third day, even when the world is crushing in and around us and it seems so unpopular and hard and difficult to be a follower of you. Father, I'm so grateful for the people you've put in my life and the community of Dothan Messianic Fellowship. Continue to guide us and lead us. Show us how we can serve our city. Show us how we can reach the lost around us and bring them into your kingdom, to bring them into your presence. Father, help us to be a people who are addicted to your presence, who crave your presence, who crave the blood of the Lamb that was shed on our behalf. Help us to crave that more than anything else, more than knowledge, more than fellowship, more than food, more than status. We long for your presence, and we long for your glory. Teach us to love what you love and to hate what you hate. We thank you, and we are so eternally grateful for the death of our Savior, Yeshua of Nazareth, the King of the Jews and the King of the world. We proclaim him as King right now. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and we long to see that come in our days. When will you reign in Zion? Soon, even in our days, may you dwell there forever. We pray right now for the peace of Jerusalem. We pray for its leaders, leaders of Israel. Pour out your spirit on that country. There's so many of them lost right now, Father, in that nation that need you, that need to live set apart in holy lives. Father, help them repent now before it's too late, before that great and fearful day of the Lord that comes. We thank you and praise you in the mighty and precious name of our Messiah, Yeshua. Amen.